Hello, guys. It's Derek from the Fantasy Flyer, and we're here to talk about Week 1 because Week 1 is in the books. Hope all of you had a fantastic opening week to the fantasy season. I did not.
Loser! You're a loser!
All
Are
three
you
of my
feeling
leagues.
sorry for yourself? Well, you should be, because you are dirt! You make me sick, you big baby!
Was not good for me. 0 for 3 in every single league, but I got a lot of good insight on a lot of my players, specifically in the Dynasty League, which is the one that I really, really, really care about because I'm 6 years deep, 6 years. Some of those numbers, I don't know.
2 + 2 is 4, -1, that's 3, quick maths.
So yeah, there's some good players out there, and that did some amazing things. There were some teams that probably should have played better that we would have expected more. Shout out Seahawks, shout out Giants, among others. Those are not just the only teams. And then there's some underlying rookies who had some great spotlight time. Some because of injury, some because of opportunity, and I am here to talk about those. So after Week 1. This is going to be the forgotten rookies who should no longer be forgotten. So tune in, give this video a like, a subscribe, a share, and let's hop right into it. Your honorable mentions. So a couple things to note. First off, I'm not going to be talking about the first round rookies, the go and get them in Dynasty or in keeper drafts or in rookie drafts. I'm not going to be talking about the Bryce Young or the Bijan Robinson or the Jordan Addison or the Jahmyr Gibbs. I'm not going to be talking about those guys. Why? Because somebody's probably already got them, especially in Dynasty or multiple spot keeper leagues. It's just the truth of the matter is they will get better as this year goes on. They already had draft capital. They already had the opportunity to be the wide receiver or quarterback or running back one. And that means that they're not really my focus. This is for the forgotten rookies, the ones that were probably ignored in most redraft leagues. They were probably drafted after the first round in most, if not all, dynasty leagues, and some of them are extremely deep or potentially still on even dynasty waivers and free agency lists. Those are the ones that I'm looking at, and you'll understand more as we get there. Now, for these honorable mentions, these are not people you want to go out and get this week. These are good signs for players that probably aren't on teams. So let's start the list with Michael Wilson of the Arizona Cardinals. Now you might say, Michael Wilson, why would I want anything to do with that team? Didn't you just say avoid everything Cardinals? Absolutely. But again, positive sign going forward. Who led the Cardinals this past Sunday in snaps for wide receivers? Was that Rondale Moore? No. Was it Hollywood Brown? It was Michael Wilson at 90% snaps. Now, he only got a couple targets out of that and only had a couple catches for like 19 yards. But the fact that he's getting out there, getting his route running down, and he's the tallest guy out of their wide receiver core, that could mean a lot when Kyler Murray comes back. Keep an eye on Michael Wilson. Number 2 on this list is Luke Musgrave. Another player similar to Michael Wilson who didn't really do a lot, had 5 targets, caught 3 of them, had 50 yards, was very solid. But more importantly, he played 85% of the snaps, clearly outlining that he is going to be the tight end one, and there's no question about it. He doesn't have the solid hands as the wide receiver group, and the wide receiver group itself is very deep. Not to mention, they don't have Christian Watson yet, who will demand 8 to 14 targets. And there's a battle for wide receiver 3 that we'll talk about momentarily. But the fact he's getting on the field with an offense that's growing is an extremely positive sign. In multiple spot keeper leagues, I wouldn't be afraid to look at him when your tight ends start going down later this season, if that happens to be your problem. Next one on this list, we have to flash back all the way to Thursday Night Football last week, which seems like a year ago because so much happened this week. But who can forget the performance by Rashee Rice? Contrary to the first 2 on this list, Rashee Rice did not see 80 or 90% of snaps. He only saw 30% of snaps, a total of 20. It's what he did with those 20 snaps, however, that's incredibly impressive to me. He had 20 snaps total. He was targeted on 5 of them, so a 25% target share of possible snaps. And then he also caught 3 catches, and one of them was a red zone target for a touchdown. Positive signs for a team that has the greatest quarterback in the league right now, and a team that doesn't have a clear wide receiver one. Sky Moore and Kadarius Toney didn't exactly thrill, and it's a tough loss for the Kansas City Chiefs. So depend a little more on Rashee Rice? Maybe. Out of all these honorable mentions, he's probably my closest to being a waiver pickup at this time. Watch for a couple more weeks before making the dive, however, unless you have a free and easy spot that you can get rid of right now. The last one on this list, as I just mentioned, is the wide receiver 3 battle in Green Bay. Dontavian Wicks and Jaden Reed are currently in the midst of that battle. It's been happening most of preseason, and it clearly seemed to happen in the first game against the Bears. Dontavian Wicks did not have a great draft profile. He doesn't have an amazing release. His route running is very shaky, but similar to Michael Wilson, who we talked about earlier, he is a big body who can go up and win contested catches. He led the team with 63% of snaps, and right behind him in the mid-50s was Jaden Reed. The team is trying to figure out who will be behind Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson when it comes to those 3 wide receiver sets. Keep an eye on this battle, because not now, not week 3, probably not even by week 6 or 7, maybe even week 8, but eventually someone's going to win and someone is going to be productive, and as wide receivers start to go down, it's important to note who your options are. Now we're going to get into the top 3 performers out of the rookies that nobody was talking about. Probably I'm the first person to even put it on YouTube and really chat about it. Here is your feature presentation. Number 3, Sam Laporta, tight end, Detroit Lions. There was extreme value in drafting Sam Laporta in the second round of the 2023 draft. Number 1, it showed Detroit knew they had to fill the tight end spot. Number 2, it's an offense that is relatively high-powered. Number 3, there's a large gap in the wide receiver core missing, with Jameson Williams being out for 6 weeks due to suspension. So what Sam Laporta happened to run into in his first professional game that is actually during the regular season, he goes 5 for 5 on his targets, catches all 5 of them, gets 39 yards, shows off the hands, proves himself to be dependable in this offense, and he does it on 83% of the snaps. So what does this mean? He's probably the most offensive-minded tight end that could have come out of this 2023 draft. And he's only probably going to have more opportunities going forward. He's a good waiver wire pickup now. Not the best, but just a good one. If you have a free spot, if you put someone on IR, if you had an Aaron Rodgers and replaced him, and now you got a free spot somewhere by chance, I would maybe look at it, especially if your tight end isn't a Darren Waller, a Mark Andrews, a Kyle Pitts, a George Kittle, a Travis Kelce. It's not a horrible idea. And even if you don't want to pull the trigger yet, just understand his value could increase. There's still 5 weeks left for him to prove himself. I'm very interested to see where Sam Laporta goes. He's number 3 on this list of rookies that I'm reacting to a little quickly, and I like it. Number 2, Roschon Johnson, running back, Chicago Bears. All right, so I'm not going to lead off and even lie. I didn't even notice this man was getting so involved in the game against the Packers. And I'm ashamed, too, because I drafted him in my Dynasty League in the second round. So that's really saying a lot. And even putting him on this list, I might be a hair biased. But for all of the players, offensive players anyway, that were drafted and were supposed to fill their positions and were playing in their first regular season game with their teams, there aren't many, in my opinion, only one, better than Roschon Johnson as far as what they did to participate, we'll say. He only had 39% of the snaps for Chicago, which is great, but that led the team. That was more than Khalil Herbert and more than Deontay Foreman. So snaps, they like him. Now let's see what he did with the snaps. He had 5 carries for 20 yards, 4 yards per carry. He had a rushing touchdown. Thumbs up on that. Oh, and he had a tied for team lead 7 targets, of which he caught 6 of them and had 35 yards off of them. So a dot over 5 per. I don't know about you, but that screams pretty productive for somebody who was rather slept on in most draft formats. He did have to play behind Bijan and would have had more hype going into the 2023 NFL draft had he not been behind Bijan at University of Texas. And then because he flew under the radar, landed in a great spot in Chicago, which granted, Khalil Herbert had a pretty good year last year, but it's not last year anymore, and Roschon Johnson is probably the future of that running back core. I mean, if it's as underrated as gets, that's Roschon Johnson based on that performance. Now, granted, he did this against the Packers defense, which is not entirely healthy right now, but still rather underrated as they also created 2 takeaways against the Bears on Sunday. Bears aren't brilliant, but let's just say this is a great sign for Roschon Johnson. Roschon Johnson. Before we get to our number 1 forgotten rookie, if you could do me a favor and you've gotten this far in the video, give us a like, give us a subscribe, and share the video to every platform. We're trying to get the Fantasy Flyer out to more people and as many people as possible as we are going hard in year 2. So now, without any further ado, here's your number 1 forgotten rookie. Number 1, Puka Nacua, wide receiver, Los Angeles Rams. The biggest surprise of all the rookies doesn't go to a Zach Charbonnet or a Zay Flowers or a Jordan Addison or a Tank Dell or a Devon Achane. It goes to one 4th-round wide receiver selected by the Los Angeles Rams by the name of Puka Nacua. Now let's get the elephant in the room out of the way. There's no Cooper Kupp on this team for the next 3 weeks and wasn't on this past Sunday, so Puka had quite the opportunity, but it's what he did with it that is impressive. He obviously stood out to Matthew Stafford, which big thumbs up to the young man. He had a team lead 119 yards, shared that honor with Tutu Atwell. But more importantly, he had 10 receptions, which is fantastic. A huge amount of looks for the rookie in the fact that he had 15 targets. To compare, Tyreek Hill, who just went for over 200 yards in a monster day for Miami, also had 15 targets and caught 11 of them. To be anywhere in the same neighborhood as Tyreek Hill, granted, not the same skill set, but it shows that there's a lot of potential there. Oh, and he didn't even lead the team in snaps for wide receivers. Tutu Atwell and Van Jefferson did. He was targeted on more than half of his receptions. Granted, the next 2 opponents are the 49ers and the Bengals, and things will get interesting against both of those teams who allow less than stellar completion percentages. But at least for this week, Puka Nacua is the most underrated rookie, and that's a very, very important honor to be distinguished with. If he can have solid outings versus San Francisco and Cincinnati, he's going to creep up into a solid wide receiver 2 outlook for the rest of the season, and it will lighten the load on Cooper Kupp. I'm interested to see if that can happen. If he's on your waiver wire after those 2 supposed performances were to happen, I would suggest you make that not a thing anymore and you pick him up. Puka Nacua is the number 1 forgotten rookie. This has been Derek for the Fantasy Flyer, and we will catch you all soon as we sign out with our usual Bob Barker.
Bob Barker reminding you, help control the pet population. Have your pet spayed or neutered. Goodbye, everybody.